And Your Worship, we're live.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and good morning, everybody. We'll start this meeting with a land acknowledgement. We begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. We acknowledge that the town of Wasaga Beach is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Aninashpi, the Haudenosaunee, the Tohinan Tati, and the Wendat peoples, and is home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as part of an intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards a new understandings and new relationships, and we ask for guidance in all we do. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Do we have any at the table today? Seeing none, if at some point throughout the meeting you have a pecuniary interest, please disclose it at that time. Item number 3, under deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings, we do have some presentations today. We'll start 3.1 with our Director of Recreation, Events, and Facilities, Chris Roos. He's also got folks here from Colliers Project, the leaders, and the presentation is with regards to the Twin Pad Arena and Library. So good morning, Chris, and welcome.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of Council. It's my pleasure to be here today. As the Mayor just mentioned, we've got Ron Spina. He is the principal for the town's Twin Pad Library project, working for Colliers Project Managers. So he's been involved with a number of staff in his organization that are helping us steer this project. And he's got a number of slides today. We've also got Pam Powell from the library. She and I obviously have been involved in this project for some time, along with Colliers, who came on board in 2019. And we've got about 45 minutes today of general information, and hopefully there's time to pause for some questions throughout our slides. But ideally, we can get through a lot, and there's a lot going on. It's a big project, and we're running full speed right now, so I hope you can all appreciate that we may not be able to give you all the details today, but we're doing our best to give an overview.
Thank you, Chris. So you prefer questions as we go, or do you want us to hold questions to the end? Which is better for you?
How about we do it by speaker? I think I may perhaps use about 4 slides for myself, 4 slides for Pam, and then the bulk of the construction information is coming from Ron at the end. He's got about 20 slides, but if we pause at the end of my 4 slides, and I might ask Ron to give some insights, or Pam, depending on the nature of the question, and vice versa for the other 3 sections.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Okay,
please
good.
Proceed.
Yeah, I'm just going to share the screen. And I go, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, they all look the same. I would have gone really quick through Jocelyn's slides. She's probably got 50. Okay, good. And do I get rid of this view? I can't get to it under there. Perfect. Thank you, Severin. Good. So the first item that I wanted to bring up, and I know that this is a big one, but there are a lot of operational costs that are going to come on board when this building opens. We expect to open by the end of 2023. That we have done an extensive staffing study and developed a number of operational initiatives that will be implemented as this new building comes online. Very specifically, as it comes to revenues and expenses related to the new Twin Pad Library and staffing costs especially, we have built out information and projections that are going to be part of the 2023 budget process. And we elected to reserve that bigger discussion. We can have some general conversation, but the specifics are going to come out, and we definitely have some detailed information to bring to council that are, in addition, enhancements to our current budget that we're carrying because of the opening of this building. So One big initiative that is yet to happen, we're just on the onset now. We've got design for a lot of the specific furnishings throughout the building, but this is a big element in every new facility. And we have set aside a budget in the millions, not quite $2 million, but we have a long list of procurement items that the town will work on. Colliers is supporting us with this. It's part of their contract to help us through, but generally, this is a big purchasing action, and probably will be bringing forward a number of different purchases for council approval as the procurement unfolds. But to give you a general understanding, we've got furnishings that are outside of the library specific, but the number one item in this is furnishings for the library itself. We've got study carrels, bookcases, elements of lounge type furniture that goes in the lobby, as well as in the different seating areas within the library. There's a number of meeting rooms throughout the building, and office furnishings as well. So desks and bookcases, it adds up when you've got this size of a building. Beyond that, there are general outdoor furnishings, for example, park benches. I think we've got 17 park benches, so it's a significant number as we budget this furniture, fixtures, and equipment process. And another big one is multi-purpose room tables and chairs. These plastic standard round and rectangular tables, they add up, and we've got sufficient seating for large events where we can double the size of a room with upwards of 600. We've got some padded, some plastic, etc. Beyond that, maintenance equipment is a big item that we are working on, and we go right down to details like garbage cans, and we've got 6 different sizes of garbage cans for all of the different rooms and common spaces, as well as hoppers, etc., for staff to get outside with pickup. And then snow clearing is another big one. You can't store gasoline inside a public building like this, and we've got a special shed outside, etc. There's 800 meters of sidewalks at this facility, so there's a number of elements that we're building into the budget. A man lift that can take people 36 feet in the air, so we can change light bulbs and do high cleaning, floor scrubber, these kind of elements. So equipment is a big piece of opening this building. Kitchen equipment, it is also a big piece. We intend to have a concession that's privately contracted, and we haven't budgeted for the appliances in that area. We intend that the private contractor will come forward with their own appliances, and it'll be like a lease type setup that they'll bring their own furnishings. But beyond that, there's a commercial kitchen in the large multi-purpose rooms. There's a staff area and a number of smaller meeting spaces that have dishwashers and refrigerators, certainly in the library, a couple of the program areas, etc. Beyond that, sporting equipment. So if we run a special event in this facility, we need to take down the rink glass. And one piece of rink glass weighs about 400 pounds. And so that's a complicated undertaking that the staff will do from time to time, so that people sitting in the front row of the stands don't have glass in front of them at a speaker event or a concert type event. So we've got a special suction cup unit that goes on the front of a forklift to lift these heavy pieces of glass, and they go on special racks. We've got a storage study so that we can roll this heavy glass out of the way into storage areas underneath the stands, etc. So there's a lot of sporting equipment beyond that. And one little highlight that we've built into the budget is a mini stick rink. So this is, some of you may have seen them at arenas around Simcoe County. I know there are a few already, but this is kind of like a park inside. It's just a small 9 by 20 rink that's heavy duty, and kids can play inside there with small sticks and Nerf ball, but it'll be a spot that they can go to. If they're not signed up in hockey, they can still have fun, and it's intended for the upper landing, so a little out of the way spot, but a good spot for siblings who are waiting for their family changing in the change rooms, etc. So that's it, but pretty extensive. I think we've got close to 75 items on this furniture, fixtures, and equipment grouped into packages that we'll start procuring in December, in fact. So it's upon us. And last but not least, I will say that the furnishings have undergone a significant scrutiny system with especially the library and designed by our architects. So experts in coming up with robust type of equipment that should last a reasonable amount of time, and that's it's not always in the perfect colors. I think everyone wants to talk colors, but we've got some colors there too, and we've got a lot of whites and grays and blacks. So I'm sure as it starts to come out, there will be some questions about that, but we are relying on the experts, our architects, to give us the direction on some of those aesthetic feels for the building. Okay, environmental considerations. I know that this is a comment that has come up a number of times because we're working towards a sustainable future, and obviously a building of this size, this is an important idea. So I just wanted to cite that there are a number of sustainable measures that have already been implemented in our design, and we have a July 2022 staff report that came out. It's a good summary. If some of you or all of you on council haven't had a chance to see it, I think it's a good starting point to understand some of the features. Certainly, this building has efficiencies far beyond our current 25,000 square foot building at 117,000 square feet. I think we're going to be coming in leaps and bounds on efficiency, but it's still an expensive feature to have refrigerated ice surfaces in the summertime, et cetera. But it's a good spot to start to understand all the elements that are built into our design. One idea that has come up a number of times, and it isn't in our current scope of our project, but it's solar array. And this means putting solar panels on the roof of the arena library as well. There's a large square footage there. The building is close to 2 acres, and there are many communities across Ontario, across the world, I suspect, that are putting up solar arrays to try and offset some of the energy uses with a renewable resource. We don't have this designed with our current building, but we know that our current building is suitable, and our roof is designed for the solar array. So there's no issue with load, and there's no issue with, for example, if we would have to resurface the roof with a different membrane that could take the weight or the stands of the solar array. So we've dealt with that with the design of the roof membrane, but this is a quick win, I think, for our community. The design itself would be likely somewhere 5 to 10% of the total cost. We've already been given order of magnitude estimates over $2 million for the solar array. So there's a payback that would be over decades. I would guess 2 decades likely, but we would obviously benefit in the long run if we could come up with an idea like a solar array. And I think we've also heard these discussions quite a few times about funding opportunities, and certainly there are net zero emission green type funding opportunities, and I think that it comes without saying that knowing our building is close to completion, and I say that cautiously, but we're about a year away from finishing. We're more about retrofit, I would suggest now, than we are about changing the current design. But it doesn't mean that anything is impossible. I just put that out there. Design processes sometimes can take 3-4 months. And 3 or 4 months from now, we will be looking at the finish line on this building, and therefore we just have to be cognizant as we look for opportunities with the TPL that it's more about retrofit than it is about changing the current design that we have. So this is where we're going to transition to Pam Powell, but are there any questions at this point based on my first few slides?
Thank you very much, Chris. Questions from council. Councillor White?
Yeah, thank you. Just a question about the solar retrofit. Like, I understand that the roof can handle the load and all that sort of stuff, but have you considered like how would you'd have to run wires and equipment through the building for that? Is that retrofit as easy as you think, or is that not been accounted for?
There certainly is a routing system. I think we called it conduit originally. We knew that that was built into the design. I think Ron might have a little more detail for you on that.
Morning, Ron. Welcome.
Good morning, through your worship. Yes, what we've done is we've built in an empty conduit to accommodate the wiring, because we'd have to wire up to the roof to the solar array and wire it back down to a battery system or whatever the system is. So we've accommodated that, and there's sufficient space in the back of house that any equipment that has to be mounted in the back of house, we can provide for it. So we designed it, as Chris said, in anticipation that maybe there's a very good chance that you may put solar arrays on the roof in the future. So those accommodations have been made.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions? Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if this is the appropriate time or you're getting into it later, but I've heard a lot of different numbers as to the annual operational cost, anticipated or projected cost of the new facility versus the current facilities. Do we have a rough number that we could just have out there? Because I've heard 3 or 4 different versions.
Thank you, Councillor. Chris? Or maybe Jocelyn?
I certainly think that we are going to address this specifically through the budget process, and that was my messaging today. I look over to Jocelyn because it's a bit of a combination of facility as well as library fees, but I don't know if we have a round number at this stage, Jocelyn.
So, I'm sorry, Jocelyn. I think at this point to move this meeting along, I think we should just wait until that comes to us, if that's all right with you, Councillor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Any other questions for Chris? All right, I do have a couple. You had mentioned that the canteen is going to be privately run. That is the intent, and that we would depend on the corporation or the individual who is successful in that bid. I'm assuming it'll be a bidding process to supply or to equip the canteen. So are we talking fryers and grills, or are we talking minor pieces of equipment? You know, coming from the restaurant industry, I can tell you that's a big number to provide new equipment, and I would think that what we don't want is to be having old equipment put in our new facility that we're going to be dealing with on a regular basis, and we won't be dealing with it perhaps, but what's most important is that canteen, once the arena opens, is open and operational on a regular basis, not sporadically or periodically. So maybe you could speak to that, Chris. I would appreciate it.
Certainly, Mayor Smith. So the first answer is yes. We are currently under a plan to privately contract the concession. So there's a small, I would guess, 500 square foot kitchen and a little bit of storage area. It is a purpose-built area. We actually have a millwork design for that area. We have large upright commercial refrigerators that would fit in. The town has not currently budgeted to purchase those. We also have a fire fume hood system, a commercial grade with fire stop, et cetera, built into that room. So that is something that we wouldn't ask someone to furnish otherwise. But yes, there is a requirement for a private contractor at this stage. I mean, we have not put out that private RFP process yet for people to bid, but we expect that they would bring along things like deep fryers and grills. So the town does currently operate 2 smaller concessions, and one is at the sports park. It's about a 3-4 month operation, primarily on evenings where we have minor ball and soccer, and weekends when we rent out the fields to softball tournaments for the most part. We have a second concession that runs in tandem with that. It's through my department, with a few part-time staff at the arena as well. So we have a little bit of equipment ourselves that might be viable there. I think that our fryers, et cetera, are up to speed, but at this point we intend to do a turnkey type of operation. And I'll cite the other piece that you mentioned, and it was a good point. Part of that RFP process will be setting a standard so that when people show up, they know I came here on a Thursday last month and I had a coffee at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. and I intend to have a coffee again. Are you here? And we know that buildings like this are at times of the year or seasons or when there are events or non-events can be loss leaders for a proprietor like that was taking on our concession. So this will be an element of it too, that we sort of guarantee ourselves 50 hours a week of service so that our regulars can depend on it regardless of if there's a margin there on this day or that day.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. And the last question I had was with respect to furnishings. at $2 million or thereabouts. What percentage would you say is library versus arena?
I think that's difficult to generalize, but by square footage, we talk about the building as 80%, 20%. The recreation features are obviously massive in comparison when you talk about ice rinks versus library seating and bookcases. But I think that the furnishings might be more in the 50-50 range, just because these heavy-duty bookcases, and the furnishings are intensive in a library, and there's literally nothing on an ice surface. There are definitely contingencies built in there, et cetera, but I think we're well-positioned based on an extensive process with our consultants to price out the library furnishings, et cetera.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on then, if there's no other, oh, sorry, Councillor Eagle, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Yes, just back to the canteen, just common sense question here. Is it set up, like, I get hockey games and all that type of thing, but are there facilities there if someone wanted to rent that? Is there a room where people could, say, have 50 people in for a dinner and use that facility?
Yes, absolutely. So much like you've seen at the Recplex over the years, we have two multi-purpose rooms. The upstairs one seats about 60. It's called the Rotary Room. There was a sponsorship there, so it's good for a medium-sized meeting. And I think I liberally say it seats 60. I think that would be tight. 6 round tables with 10 people at each. It's a smaller room. And it has what I would call a kitchenette, more like residential grade, you know, an oven and a coffee center, et cetera. But then downstairs, where we have our larger multi-purpose room, that one will liberally sit 280. And it has a divider wall, and there's a commercial kitchen there. So it has a proper heavy-duty dishwasher. We have shelving for all of the dishes, et cetera. And it has a proper fume hood there with a grill and commercial-grade ovens. It would be similar to the kitchen that we have at the Oakview. So a wedding could take place on the main floor in the multipurpose room.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Councillor Belanger?
Yeah, sorry, just one more thought on the concession. A couple of the locations that we had toured had inside and outside access to the concession. I think that would probably be a benefit for someone renting or leasing that section, but I didn't know if there was any consideration for that.
We definitely do have outdoor event space. As some of you may have seen, we've got this basketball court area in the back corner, and we've got power there for like an outdoor concert, like a Jazz in the Park would work there, for example. But as far as the concession goes, it's central in the lobby. Although I think that for the most part, if there are people at that property, we expect that building will be open from 7 in the morning till 11 in the afternoon, or 11 in the evening. So in that sense, I think that the lobby space is always just a general access area, and a significant space too. I think we're over 7,000 square feet just in the lobby. So that is a bit of a spread out area if there were opportunities, you know, an outside event, but people might sit down for eating indoors, et cetera.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, carry on, please.
Good morning. I just wanted to give you a rundown of the fundraising for the Twin Pad Arena and Library project. Of course, the construction steering group understood the importance of obtaining some fundraising funds to support this project. Our first inclination was to put out an RFP for a consultant to manage this fundraising properly. We received 2 proposals in 2020. Unfortunately, both proposals had an estimated cost of almost $500,000, and the one proposal was going to teach us how to fundraise, and the other one couldn't promise raising more than $1 million in funds. We did not see that as cost effective. So we opted to hire a fundraising professional to work as a contract staff person to manage this project. So that person was starting from dead scratch. There weren't any policies in place at the time for the town for fundraising, so she's had to start right at the beginning to make sure that everything was in place in order to do this properly. So when she came on in January, she started with donor and naming rights policies that had to be passed by council, contract development that had to be reviewed by the legal department. Next, she tackled asset evaluations, which meant for her, she consulted other municipalities in the area to glean what they had been evaluating their similar features. And she took that into consideration as well as our area. She looked at industry in our area, manufacturing in our area, and large business in our area. So she arrived at values that she thought were conducive to gaining sponsorship from this locality. Those asset evaluations were agreed and approved by council. She then tackled branding, marketing materials, and website development to ensure that once we launched, everything was in place to really promote this project. She established and set up a Canada Helps website platform to manage the donors and the sponsorship funds so that we can easily see and track where those funds were coming from who. She set up a TipTap platform implementation, allowing people to make quick donations with their credit cards, $5 at a time in different locations throughout the community. And she established a community gift program looking for simple ways that community members can get involved, whether that's sponsoring, purchasing an arena seat, being able to put your family's name on it, or a bench, a tree, a library leaf, a brick, that sort of thing. And then she also set up a donor list, developed that with the help of the CSG, members of staff, members of council. The campaign launched in September 2021 with official ground turnover, announcing the major sponsor of the building, Quarterly Tree Zancor family, with their $1 million sponsorship for naming rights of the building. At that time, she pursued other sponsors for the other assets. That campaign continued through to June 2022, at which time her contract expired and went into more of a stewardship role. So currently, the fundraising coordinator is a library staff member at this time. She is stewarding the donors. She's still following up on some asset donations. There are some contracts pending that she's still in discussions with, and she's managing the promotions of the donors' names and all that sort of thing. So it's in a holding pattern right now, trying to encourage a community gifting. But next slide. We feel that we have pretty much accomplished our goal. Our goal was $1.7 million in fundraising, and we're very close to that. We have $1.455 million in pledged asset sponsorship. We have $55,400 in hand for general donations. Community gifts are sitting at $28,000 in donations, and we have included the new library golf tournament funds that were organized by the Merlewood Golf Course from 2018 and 2019. So we're very close to our 1.7 goal. I firmly believe that we should manage to come very close to that by the end of 2022, 2023. We predict that as people see that building grow and develop, that they're going to get even more excited about making sure that their family has a name in it, just so that they have that legacy as well. We feel that it has been a successful fundraising project, considering that we have had one staff member handling this extensive project pretty much solely, but with support of staff. What this fundraising campaign has also accomplished is significant community awareness of this project, building goodwill in the community, getting people excited about what this project can bring to the community. Next slide. We just wanted to talk about where people can get more information about this project, whether it's members of the community or members of council. The Let's Talk website has a full listing of reports that have to do with this project right from the beginning, talking about finding the right location. Of course, you can see Chris Rose's monthly video updates are posted there as well, which are fantastic for giving you a bird's eye view of the building as it rises from the ground. So anybody looking for additional information from the past is invited to access this site and learn more about the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Questions for Pam? Councillor Timms?
Thank you, Your Worship. And for my own information, Pam, what's the difference between a general donation and a community gift?
Through your worship. The general donations are those wonderful people that walk in, and there have been a number of them with $5,000, $10,000 donations that don't necessarily want to sponsor an asset and don't necessarily want to sponsor a community gift, just a standard donation that they are giving for this project. The community gifts have...
Sorry, Councillor, turn your mic on when you speak, please. Thank you.
And could you tell me what the community gift is?
The community gifts are identified elements in the new project where people can have their names recognized. So as I said, we have the seats in the ice rinks that you can put your name on. We have a pseudo brick wall, so to speak, in the building where you can put your name on. There's going to be a design tree, library leaves where you can have your name. You can sponsor a bench and put your name on it, a tree and have your name displayed on it. So these elements range from $100 up to $2,000, so more manageable for the average family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor DeLeo?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, the $1 million that was donated for the naming rights, is there a time frame for that? Is there like for 10 years, 20 years, or is it permanent?
It is not permanent. I believe it's a 25-year naming rights, so we can approach them again at the end of their term and see if they would like to continue or find another sponsor.
One more question. That 1 million, is that part of the 1.63 already raised?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, is there any rooms or areas of the two buildings that are yet to be sponsored?
Yes, through your worship. I believe there are about 5 to 7 assets that are still pending. A number of them are in the library. I think that all of the change rooms have been spoken for. They were between 5,000 and 15,000, so they went really fast. We have a number of program rooms in the library that are available, and then some spaces outside that are also available.
All right, seeing no other questions, carry on, Chris.
Great, thank you, Mayor Smith. I might just add on this final slide, before we hand over to Ron for the construction details, we have a report coming forward today, so there is a formal council meeting later today, and there's a terms of reference approval that we bring forward our new construction steering group. So I just wanted to cite that, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this idea, but we have an internal steering group beyond Pam and myself, and that will be discussed later on today. More or less, we have authorities built into that committee, and I want council to understand that scope, budget, and schedule, these are traditional, the most intensive areas of our construction project. Those decisions are left with council. So we would always bring ideas to this group for approval if we were to change timelines, the total budget number, or the features in the building. You may remember last week this storage idea. That was a change in scope. We added 500 square feet and 3 weeks to the project schedule, and therefore we talked about that in council. And those limitations come out loud and clear in our terms of reference. It's a short document, but it talks about the structure of that committee. And last but not least, I suspect there may be interest. Lots and lots of people talk to us about tours, and we don't give construction tours very often, but we are intending to bring you, as our council group, to get a better feel for what the project entails onto the construction site soon, and we'll schedule that with the general contractor. For those of you who don't understand, during a construction project, the town doesn't actually own the property. We've handed our property over to the general contractor, so Aquacon is technically in control of that facility until substantial completion, at which time they hand it back to us. And safety is a big element in all construction sites, so we'll have to have an organized tour there where everyone wears hard hats and we're walked through the site by an Aquacon staff person. Good, so I'll hand it over to Ron now for his slides.
Sorry. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, this is on this piece.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me this morning to give you an update on the project. Through your worship, if you'd like, I'll walk through the slides and then have questions at the end, or if you'd like, I can stop partway through at various points and stop for questions. What do you prefer?
I think we'll wait till the end.
Wait till the end? Okay, thank you very much then. So we started, of course, with an architect's rendering. I'm showing you the rendering here that I believe this is probably about 2 or 3 years old. This is what the building started, and this is the way we'd like the building to look like at the end. I think we're making generally pretty good progress. I'll just very quickly show you some of the elements on the building for the new council. The top picture is an elevation from River Road showing basically the library elevation, and the drawing on the bottom is a view from the west, which shows at the back of the building the community ice rink, and at the front of the building, of course, with the large windows, the library. So I'll just kind of give you a brief idea on how the building's laid out. The green in the middle is the building. It basically runs, I'll say, basically through the middle of the site. What that does is that allows for parking on both the east side and the west side. River Road is on the bottom of the slide. The library has front elevation on River Road, and stacked behind the library of the 2 ice rinks. The ice rink to the right is what we call your event arena. It has seating for 860 people. And the library to the left, or pardon me, the ice rink to the left is a community rink which has seating for approximately 150 people. The event arena is also designed so that you can have large events such as a concert that you could seat 2,000 people to attend. We've been through a lot of discussion on how that would function, for example, in the summer. We've made provisions where we could plug in, for example, temporary air conditioning in the summertime if it's on a hot night. And we've also made all sorts of provisions for extra power. We've looked at layouts where if there's a stage on the end of the arena, we could accommodate the seating. If we want to put the stage on the side of the arena, we could accommodate the seating. We can black out the lobby with curtains for events. So we've done everything we can to try to make this a true multi-use arena, not only for skating events, ice rinks, ice skating that is, and figure skating, but also for any other events that the town will want to hold. The community rink, it once again has fewer seats, but it's really set up to function as a pure community facility for all community events, of course, ice skating and everything else. But as Chris mentioned earlier, if you look at the top right on the site, not only do we have parking on the top right, but we also are going to be lining those areas for ball hockey outside, as well as outdoor basketball. Chris also mentioned that we're providing for power there. So we're trying to build as much flexibility into this building so that it can run a number of different events during all the seasons. The pink parking spots you see there and the pink lines represent accessibility. We spent a significant amount of time with the design team and meeting with the accessibility committee here at the town to accommodate accessibility requirements. We've actually gone beyond the code for accessibility. We've added a couple of extra parking spots beyond the minimum, because after consultation with your accessibility committee, we came to the conclusion that that was the right thing to do. Now, between the library and River Road, there will be landscaping. It's maybe difficult to tell by the slide, but there will be extensive number of trees, shrubbery. There's going to be an outdoor area for the library to run programming, but there's a buffer there, a green buffer, between the front of the building and River Road. Another point I want to make is in the top left, there will be a future paramedic station. We have worked with the design team for the paramedic station to get some efficiencies in stormwater, in managing stormwater. If you see in the top left, there is actually a drainage, a storm ditch that runs through the paramedic property that will lead into the infrastructure on Theme Park Road. That comes from our storm pond. All of the stormwater on the site will be retained on site in our storm pond. So I'll just briefly explain the program items. I've already mentioned there's 2 arenas. There is a walking track on the 2nd level of the community arena. Of course, we have a library. We have 2 multipurpose rooms. Chris already mentioned the large multipurpose room with seating for approximately 250 people, fit up for large events with a kitchen. We have a lobby that runs from west to east, and it connects up both parking areas, the parking area on the east and the parking area on the west. That provides total flexibility and accessibility into the building. Of course, we have back of house for mechanical and electrical. We also have administration offices for staff, of course, and for the library. And we have a building with a total gross floor area of 117,000 square feet. This is a 3-dimensional view from the top. I'll just quickly go through it again. You can see the multipurpose room in the bottom right has a terrific location. It's facing River Road. It has windows, plenty of windows. It's going to be nice and bright. It can also be blacked out for night events. As Chris said, it can be subdivided into 2 areas. So there's total flexibility in that space, as well as I said, there's a kitchen. Even though you can't tell by this picture, adjacent to that is public washrooms, so washrooms are very close by in the event you have a special event, and obviously that's a convenience, a nice convenience. The library is adjacent to it, and the library is directly off the lobby. In the middle of the lobby is the main reception desk, so the people coming in from either end, they can be controlled easily from the main reception desk. Opposite the main reception desk is going to be the concession, like Chris mentioned. We go upstairs, and I mentioned that there's going to be a 2nd level walking track. This walking track circles the whole ice rink, the whole community rink. So it's quite an impressive walking track. And then we also have some offices and other washrooms and another multipurpose room on the 2nd level. So the purpose of this diagram is not for you to memorize millwork, but It's just to show you that the red lines indicate the extensive amount of millwork that's going to go into this facility. This work will be starting to take shape in the summer, and not until the building's totally enclosed. Millwork is all made out of laminates and woodworking. But we've spent a significant amount of time with the design team in developing a comprehensive millwork package. We're continuing to fine-tune that package. That is probably the last large trade, besides all the trades required to do the asphalt and the exterior work. The millwork is the last large interior trade that we're just finalizing the details on right now. So prior to Colliers being chosen to assist you with this project, a governance structure was created. Of course, Wasaga Beach Council has authority over this project. You created a construction steering group, which I understand is in the process of being slightly reconfigured with the new council, which makes recommendations to council regarding various aspects of the programming budget schedule. The project manager, my team is reporting to the CSG, and then we're acting as your representative in addressing the general contractor, in addressing engineering and the architect with design, and in making sure that we have other specialist consultants on the project to deliver their services, such as things like geotechnical testing, site investigations, and all that. All the other consultants' work has been completed. That was completed quite a while ago. Design work is really now contract administration because the project's about 50% in construction. And of course, most of our activities are associated with addressing general contractor issues that may arise and any change work. So we started on September the 20th. That's when we issued the contract to the general contractor to start for the construction. We have had a few delays. There were some early struggles with steel delivery, all related to COVID, all related to everything that's been going on in the world. That probably delayed a couple of months. We did have a few labor strikes in May of this year. Aquacon, the general contractor, is a union contractor. So that resulted in a few delays. Overall, based on the initial schedule, we've fallen back about 4 months. We plan to have the building ready for use in December, a year from now. So just very briefly, I'm not expecting the council to memorize these percentages, but I guess I just wanted to put those on the slides. I'll just give you the highlights. The structural steel, everybody can see it's almost complete. Roof decking is nearing completion. Of course, the roof decking is important so we can get the roofing on top of it, and we can get the building as close to tight as we can so we can continue on with the work inside. Generally, my experience with these types of facilities is they're mostly concrete block. And the reason why they're mostly concrete block is very durable. So even though there is some drywall in this facility, I'd say probably 80% of it is concrete block. In the ice rink, almost all the walls are concrete block. And as I said, it's totally durable. You can hit your sticks against the block, you can do whatever you want. It's pretty solid stuff. That's why you see a lot of scaffolds and that sort of thing around the building. It's for the concrete block. We've got two types of block. We've got exterior block and then the nicer block, which we call the architectural block, is on the interior. So we're making pretty good progress on generally the block work on the outside, and now they're starting to ramp up on the inside for the architectural block. The ice plant, we're 50% there in the ice plant. Under slab piping is basically almost all done, but there's still a lot more work to be done on the ice plant. The ice plant has arrived. They're installing it in the back of the house, and that's progressing pretty well too. And of course, we have mechanical, which is ductwork, plumbing, and everything else continues to progress on schedule with the schedule I just told you about. Same with electrical. And at the start of the project, they start to work through the final details and shop drawings. We're about 90% through shop drawings. We have about 10% remaining. Probably the bulk of that is the millwork that I mentioned to you on an earlier slide. So I have a couple of views of the progress. I'll apologize. I think these slides are probably about 2 weeks old because I just drove by the site again this morning. And there's, if you look at the library, it definitely looks a little bit different than what you're going to see in the slide. These just give you a basic idea. This is the superstructure, the steel that I was talking to you about. This shows some of the metal decking that's in progress. More of the metal decking's been done since this slide was taken. This is a front view of the library on the top slide. And this is a view on the bottom slide of the back of house, showing the wall going up around the back of house where the ice plant's going to be installed. Once again, this is a view from River Road West of the library. Those big openings are all going to be glazing. So there's going to be a significant amount of natural light that the library is going to be able to steal. Even though you cannot tell in the ice rinks, talking about light, we also have windows at the high level. So we're also going to have a lot of natural lighting in the ice rinks. These are special glazing units. They control glare, because we know that hockey goalies do not like to have glare for sure. So, but they do provide a lot of natural light, and that also reduces our lighting load on the building, and it also gives you a lot of nice natural light in the ice rinks.
So I can assume if there is any glare, it'll be in the visitor's end?
Through the chair, we can do whatever you want to the visitors' end. We can do whatever you want to the visitors' dressing room if you like. You know, like Scotty Bowman used to do that stuff. But anyways, you just let us know through the chair, through the CSG, and we'll follow your direction. So, yeah, this is a view from the storm pond. Once again, it's back of house. As I said earlier, we're gonna keep all the water on the site, and have it just filter through the storm pond. That's just common practice these days. That way, we're not surcharging the storm system for Wasaga Beach. But as I said, it's common practice on all municipal projects I've been involved with. And then this is a view from the east. Even though you can't see it, there is an entrance from the east parking. That's the ice rink at the high part of the building to the back, and that's the library to the left, and to the far left, that's where your large multi-purpose room will be. Very, very close to the entrance, and of course right off the main lobby, and as I said earlier, adjacent to public washrooms. This is a view of the event arena. You start to get an idea of the raking, where the seats are going to be on one side, and this is a better view to show you where the windows are going to be at the high level. Where you see the sky, that's going to be glazing. So you're going to have plenty of natural light in the event arena. And as I said earlier, that arena can be configured for true events, like 2,000-seat events, such as a rock concert, jazz concert, even trade shows and that sort of thing. We're designing the power and all that for the event arena to be very flexible. This is a community arena. You can start to see, well, we're actually underneath the structure for the walking track above. So you can start to get an idea on the walking track, which rings the whole arena. It's a nice, large walking track, and I think it's going to be used quite a bit in this community. They all are. Every project I work on now for municipalities, they want to have walking tracks in the facilities. This is a view up on the walking track. So once again, it's a nice walking track. We've got windows in the community arena at the high level, a lot of natural light. I think it's going to be I think it's a rich space for that. So this is the inside of the library. It's just showing you, you know, I said we're about 50% on the mechanical. There's some of the ductwork's going in. We've met quite a bit with Pam's group on how many electrical pods to put on the floor to give total flexibility to move furniture around. So you have not only power, but IT connections in the floor. So we think we've built in quite a bit of flexibility in the library for Pam, because we know that these buildings, even though we're going to design the building a certain way today, probably over the next few years, there's going to be other ways to configure the building. So we try to build these, the architects, that is, try to build these spaces for total flexibility, so that in the future you've got you can move things around. So this is the lobby. We also have clear story light coming through the lobby. This is a view from, this is from east to west. On the left, somewhere in the midpoint would be the main reception desk. And somewhere at about the midpoint will be a main aisle that goes right down the middle between two ice rinks. You go down that aisle, and you're going to have change rooms on both sides. So a very easy building to understand as soon as you walk in it, and a very easy building to get around, but most importantly for Chris and Pam, it's been designed for good surveillance, so staff can always be seeing what's going on around the building. It's a big building, 117,000 square feet. But for example, at the main reception desk, someone there will be able to look down that main aisle, you know, to get at least a visual view on what's going on. There's also going to be, of course, security cameras and that sort of thing. But we spent a lot of time on trying to get a really straightforward and simple circulation pattern in the building. Not only is it great for surveillance, but it also makes for a very economical building, an efficient building. So this just shows, you know, there's work ongoing on the roof. The mechanical units, the architect created these wells on the roof where the mechanical units are within the wells, so you won't visually be able to see those mechanical units. This also provides for some better sound buffering too, even though we're kind of in the middle of the roof. But this is what we're seeing more and more in the buildings. So those wells are designed in on the roof. I don't know if I'm running over. I think I'm about okay here. I want to allow some time for questions. This is a very, very high-level budget summary. We started with a project budget. This isn't construction. This is a project budget of 59 point, or almost $60 million, just short of it. We've committed to date means we've contracted about 55 million of it. We have uncommitted about $3.4 million, and most of that is going to go towards the FF&E that Chris was talking about, and if we have any more change orders. So we think we can bring this in under the budget, is what I'm getting at. So we still got work to do. As I said earlier, we're about a year away from having the facility open to the public. We got to complete the building envelope. That work's ongoing. There's still work ongoing in the interior walls. As I said earlier, about 50% of the ice plant is complete, so we still got another 50% to go. We still have electrical, mechanical, and sprinkler systems to do. I'm sorry, I'm being a little repetitive here. We still got to procure the fixtures, furniture, and equipment. And finally, I haven't talked about this, but we've spent a lot of time on coming up with a signage package, which is interior signage as well as exterior signage for the site. We're very close to finalizing that. Once we get that finalized, then we're going to also issue those packages out and get pricing on those. Basically, what remains to be purchased is FF&E and signage. And then, of course, if we have any more construction changes from now until the end, then we set aside some money for that. And back through the chair, that finishes my presentation, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Ron. Great presentation. Start with Councillor DeLeo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, the paramedic station, okay, is that for all of Wasaga, or is it an in-house only for the arena?
I'll go back through the chair. I'm not sure if I can answer that, or not. Maybe Chris can answer it better. We were just looking at the construction aspects of it, and I'm sorry I haven't been privy to any of the final conversations. I'm not sure if Chris can answer that better.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Smith, Councillor DeLeo, we have sold that land to the county, and the County of Simcoe looks after paramedic services for everyone in Simcoe County. There is a second station in the town of Wasaga Beach, currently at the Oxbow intersection right by the new bridge, and they intend to keep that open at this time. And this second station will service out towards Elmvale as well as the town of Wasaga Beach, but I can't really speak to the specifics of where. I think they have catch-up on either side when all the cars are busy, but certainly I think the bulk is because of development expectations in the east end of Wasaga.
Thank you. I have another question on that. The reason why I'm asking that is because right next to there's a seniors home, like a seniors community. So my concern is when they get a call out, will their sirens go on immediately or like afterwards when they're on when they're on River Road?
I think that's a question we would have to speak to the County of Simcoe on and paramedic services. I think it's safe to assume that if there's an emergency vehicle leaving there and they need lights and sirens, that we'll see lights and sirens. Maybe our new fire chief would like to comment on that. Craig?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, that's correct. So the paramedic station is there to service the entire community, and it will be the second paramedic station in the town. And through their response to the community, they'll use lights and sirens as required by the Highway Traffic Act.
Thank you, Chief. Okay.
I have one more question. The walking track, are joggers allowed to use it? And if so, is there a charge to use that?
Certainly, I think that jogging, running, strollers, these type of things will be allowed. We'll have to regulate to a certain extent. And the plan is that the door will be locked. We're yet to bring that to council, but so that it doesn't just turn into a playground. You can imagine on a tournament weekend where we have 12 hockey teams, for example, and hundreds of families. We don't want it to just turn into chaos for those regular, for example, older adults. But I think that the plot will be, and we're yet to bring that to council, but there will be a nominal fee. So something like a bracelet that unlocks the door, maybe like our parking passes at the beach, something like $20 for the year. And that way we can sort of track who's coming and going. But I think that without question, we'll start for free, and we'll leave the door unlocked, and then maybe at the end of 2023, for example, we'll start to implement that so that people get interested in it as well. We want to build healthy routines, and other communities have special seasons, like summer is free. If it's a quiet time in the year, then they just unlock it if people want to get to know it, and then they buy their bracelet in the fall, that type of thing. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Timms?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was about the parking, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like 7 accessible parking spots. I know there are parking standards. I just wondered, with our aging community and the high ratio of elderly community, are we nimble enough to create more as needed?
Back through the chair. I don't remember exactly how many parking spots were agreed on. All I know is we had a number of discussions with the accessibility committee, and the number of parking spots that we landed on were the number of parking spots that they were satisfied with. But if the question is also that could you create more of those parking spots, that would require more discussion with your planning group, because I know the planning group has certain regulations that we would have to follow. And they'd have to carry on some further discussions with the planning group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, thank you very much for a very detailed and an impressive presentation. I really like the use of the back of the slight reservation or question is around that backs right onto Ivy Crescent. As Councillor DeLeo mentioned, is a retirement community, and that's naturally going to be a busy, robust, noisy area, kids gathering, laughing. Is there any plans to kind of create any sort of sound barriers or a visual barrier or anything to sort of respect the residents that are on the other sides, that we're not inundated with complaints? Please?
Chris?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Smith, to Deputy Mayor Snell. We are cognizant of this residential area nearby, and there are certain requirements to ensure a privacy fence goes in place. This is an interesting point to bring up for council, that we received a petition from the neighborhood group in this community to the south, and they're very interested in our privacy fence. So there's been a number of meetings, and we're coming up with a plan that will ideally be feasible, and then we're going to negotiate with that group and then come back to council with a solution. So there is a 6-foot heavy-duty privacy fence that was planned. There's also some grading issues there at our property line with our neighbors. The developers, Parkbridge, are working with the town as well. And the hopes are to make that fence as tall as possible to minimize any sort of headlights or noises from voices, et cetera, that come from the traffic on the other side. But it is a point of issue, and we intend to come back to council with a solution and potentially a change order if the fence that we had designed is not sufficient. The petition group had asked for a 10-foot fence, and we're going to come up with a solution that ideally works with them by raising the grade and coming up with something that should be viable. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe we spoke about this in an earlier meeting, but I think it would be good to state it publicly. But if my understanding is correct, the 1.63 in fundraising is not yet allocated as to how that'll be applied to the project, that'll be a decision at some point in the future whether we decide to add elements or pay down debt or whatever council decides. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Smith, to Councillor Belanger, yes, that is correct. We are yet to direct those funds, and the specifics on that I would have to leave to the treasurer, but I suspect that's a pending conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Ego.
Through your worship, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It was informative, and I liked it. On design, has there been things put in place for water dispensers throughout the building, especially the walking track, the type that you might see in a ski chalet, where you use your own container? Are they being implemented?
Back through the chair, yes, Councillor, we have water dispensers, but only for bottles.
Sorry?
For bottles. Go ahead.
Certainly, Councillor Ego.
Sorry, you're
Through you, Mayor Smith, Councillor Ego, what Ron was trying to say is bottle fill stations. So yes, I think it is what you are asking for. We don't have these traditional mouthpiece drinking fountains. I think the building was designed at the peak of COVID, and there's 7 or 8 different stations. They're refrigerated in some spots, and others are just general fill. But bottle fillers are ideal in hockey change rooms, for example. That's what we have, and there are about 7 stations throughout the building.
Thank you. Also, where is the elevator located inside the building? Please.
Back through the chair, the elevator is located within a few feet of the concession, so it's basically in the middle of the building off the lobby.
Thank you. One other question here, or maybe 2, actually. When they were, Deputy Mayor brought up about the neighborhood, has something been taken into effect for the invasive lighting? Like I picture, hockey arenas, that lots of lights out there. Is that taken into consideration? And would it be lighting that maybe just focuses down rather than going up into the sky? Thanks.
I'll go back through the chair to Councillor Arego. Yeah, the lighting, the type of lighting that's designed is cutoff, they call it cutoff lighting. And it's traditional lighting that cuts the lighting off from spreading outside of the site.
Okay, thank you. And what I'm failing to understand, and this may be for you, Chris, or Millers, I'm glad to hear this is a multi-use building, more than just the hockey rinks. But I'm puzzled, if it's a multi-use facility, why there's no funding for this. Can anyone give me any answer on that?
Through you, Mayor Smith. Councillor Eagle, I think I would clarify further. When you say funding, you're talking about other levels of government?
Correct.
Certainly. So leading up to the commissioning of our project, we did apply for an ISIP grant, but we were unsuccessful. I think there were upwards of $10 billion in applications, and I may not be exact, but 1 to 1.5 billion awarded at that time. And I think that the decision was made that we timed out that opportunity in order to move forward with the pending expiration of the useful life of our current arena. And therefore, in 2020, we hired architects and initiated this project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I have a few. Again, Ron, thank you, and staff, thank you. Excellent presentation. I think that Council has a much better understanding of our new arena library, so we appreciate that. A few questions, actually. The ice rink that's out back, or not the ice rink, sorry, the lined area where the tennis or the badminton courts, basketball court, can you tell I'm a real sports guy? Basketball courts and the hockey rink are going to be, is that a rink that will be flooded in the winter, or is that just going to be basically for summer, spring, fall use?
Mayor Smith, it is just an asphalt surface. So just like at the basketball courts, they'll be painted so that the kids can put nets out, but it's just a painted surface and it's asphalt. In fact, there are special gates there, and as per our planning requirements, will be times that we're going to be congested with cars, and at that time we'll have to stop the basketball or the ball hockey and open the gates and allow cars to park in there.
So it'll be used as overflow parking?
Definitely, it's part of our requirement, 350 odd spots.
Thank you, Chris. Next question with the event, I'll call it the events arena, if you will. Why the decision not to air condition that arena as well?
Back through the chair. Well, the idea was that we would air condition it on an event by event basis. We did go through an assessment on what the cost would be to air condition is excessive. So we just felt the best approach would be that, as I said, if there's just for those events, they would bring in a portable refrigeration truck and they would plug it into the building. We've accommodated the ductwork so that it's easy for somebody to do that. So we really looked at it. We balanced out what we felt was the objective as well as with what money we had available to spend.
So I guess just to follow up to that, so a thorough study or investigation was done to compare the cost of full-time air being available to that versus temporary air.
That's correct. We looked at that with the mechanical engineer, and he came to the conclusion of what I just provided you.
Thank you. Millwork, especially in kitchen areas and high-use areas, change rooms, so on and so forth. Is this your standard wood particle board millwork, or do we have stainless steel type surfaces that's going to allow that millwork to last for many years? I can tell you, coming from the restaurant industry, that millwork does not stand the test of time if it's not created properly in the beginning, and stainless is usually obviously the best life expectancy of all. So where are we at with that?
Back through the chair. So in the kitchen areas and those high-use areas, absolutely, we're looking at stainless steel. In some of the other areas which are not as high-use, we're looking at more conventional millwork, a mixture of laminates, or if it's a heavy-use desk such as the reception desk in the library or the reception desk, the main reception desk, we'll be looking at more durable products. But going back to your initial comments, yes, in the kitchen areas, we're looking at, stainless steel, highly durable product and spending the extra money now so we don't have to spend more money in the future.
Thank you very much. Stormwater pond, it's meant to hold our water there on site. I'm assuming that we looked at heavy storm times and there's not going to be any issue, heavy rainfalls, so on and so forth. It's going to be significant or sufficient.
Heavy rainfalls, like a civil engineer designed it for the heavy rainfalls, following typical civil engineering practice. So we don't anticipate that there will be any problem with heavy rainstorms. Of course, if we get a super severe event, then likely there will be some overflow, but I'm not a civil engineer. But it's generally been designed to accommodate heavy rainfalls, typical for our climate.
Thank you. And last question, the seating in the events rink, if you will. What type of seating is it?
Well, those are individual seats. We looked at 3 different manufacturers. We chose the seat that we felt was the right width and the right form for the facility. So they're individual plastic form seats.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, back to the chair. I have a clarification. There's 2 sizes. Sorry. There's 2 sizes. Sorry, there's 2 sizes. Wide and normal.
All right, thank you very much. All right, no other questions? Sorry, Councillor DeLeo?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, the basketball area, in the wintertime, can residents use it as, let's say, ball hockey? Like, can they bring their nets and play ball hockey?
I'll go back to Chris here.
Certainly. So although we don't intend to flood that surface, it will be plowed. There's probably going to be days of heavy snowfall that there will be a little bit of snow storage in that back area. But the size of our building requires 350 parking spots, so it's always going to be cleaned off. There's going to be painted lines for 3 basketball courts and a ball hockey court. But absolutely, we intend to keep that fence, so it's a bit of a park area on general, let's say, hockey, library, and figure skating nights. We shouldn't exceed 250 spots, and those extra 100 spots will be reserved.
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, lady and gentlemen. We appreciate it. I do have a resolution that council receives a presentation pertaining to the Twin Pad Arena Library project for information. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell, seconded by Councillor DeLeo. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 3.2, another presentation by the Director of Finance and Treasury. Presentations read the financial status of the municipality. Madam Treasurer?
I just need a moment to set up. Thank you.
All right. Floor is yours, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning to council members and staff and public that have joined us. So our presentation this morning is a finance education session. We're going to talk about some various financial reports, processes, legislation, and standards, some phrases and acronyms that we will use in our staff reports. And I have to say, it's hard to follow such an interesting presentation because finance is going to be numbers, and I don't have pretty slides for you. But I hope you find it informative, and let's get started. Okay, so I have an agenda here that will follow. I'm going to talk about the financial cycles, our year-end process, our forecasts, and our budget process. I'm going to talk about some financial terms, the legislation, and standards that we have to follow. I'll talk a little bit about what are some of the indicators that allow us to say we're in a strong financial position. We'll talk a little bit about what impacts the tax rates and our municipal comparators. We'll look at our 22 forecast, which is our starting point for the 23 budget. And then I'm going to have a couple of the staff members join me and talk about our grant program and our rates and fees process. So that's our agenda, and I have a fair bit to go through. So I'm not sure of our timeline here, but I think we have about an hour. So our financial cycles, we'll start with year end. We are fast approaching our year end for 22 because our fiscal year is January to December. And it takes staff about 3 months after the year end finishes to fully process all the transactions because we have reconciliations that we have to complete. There's still information that has to come in from outside companies that have payable invoices for us. And there's work to be done by staff to prepare for the financial statements for the auditors. And after we complete all of those transactions, I bring forward a staff report, which is called the year-end memo. I'll bring that forward to council and request at that time approval to process the final adjusting entries. Because while we have a budget that we set for the year, we can't spend exactly to that budget. There will be variances from the budget, and we have to book those entries at year end. So that's what we'll go through in that report, and that's around mid-March. And then following mid-May, mid-June, depending on the auditor's schedule, they will come forward to council with the draft audited financial statements, and they'll walk through a presentation and give you some information. And at that time, we will ask for the draft statements to be approved. And at that point in time, when council approves them, that is when that year end is finally over. So it's quite a longer process. I'll now talk about forecasts. And some of the, we produced 2 forecasts. One is a 10-year forecast that is for our capital works projects. So we look at what is it that we're going to be giving out or doing in works over the next 10 years. And we have a sense of the cost of those estimates for those project works. We also do a 4-year operating forecast. And that forecast allows us to see what do we project the tax rate to be based on what we know. So we have a sense of where we're headed based on the budget that we're looking at. The forecasts are brought forward only for information purposes. So we bring a budget forward and we seek approval for that and a bylaw, whereas the forecasts, we only bring them forward for information. And that is where we start our next budget year. So those are those 2 processes. And I'm going to now just move forward to the next slide. And we'll talk about the budget. So through our budget, we gain our authority to spend money through the Municipal Act. And under Section 290 of the Act, it requires the town to prepare a budget that includes all the estimates of costs that you expect to spend in the following year. You also have to include in that budget all of the debt and obligations that you have that are coming due within the next year. So if you have debenture payments that you have to make, they have to be included. If you have accounts payable that you owe monies on, all those things have to be a part of that budget, and you have to be able to cover those costs. And generally, in most years, we would approve the budget process. We'd go through it and approve the budget by December. But in an election year, it's different. The act requires that we don't approve a budget before the year the budget is for. So we're in an election year in '22. We can't approve the budget until we're in the year 2023 for the '23 budget. And that's only in the election year. That's there so that the outgoing council doesn't approve a budget for the upcoming year for the incoming council. And that gives us that flexibility. So that's where we get our authority to spend money. And if it's not in the budget, we actually don't have the authority to spend money. So sometimes during the year, we have to come forward and request an unbudgeted expenditure approval from council to amend that budget because we didn't have it in it. So we always have to have the authority to spend, and that's where it comes from. So our schedule, generally I'll bring the schedule forward to council in around July or August. The schedule, like I said, in most years it will end with the budget being approved in December. And for the 2023 schedule, I brought that forward in October simply because of the election year. And we're starting that draft 1 of the '23 budget in December. So we're going to, on the 15th, I'll go through an overview, give you a highlight of the high-level corporate budget numbers, and we'll present you with your budget binders to give you an opportunity to review the budgets, and all the individual department budgets are inside the binder. And that gives you a chance to get familiar with our process. And then we'll come back on January 19th, and you'll have the opportunity now to listen to the department heads. They'll present their budgets. They'll put forward requests that may not have been included in draft 1, but they really need to present them. Some of them could be driven by legislation, so they need to have that opportunity to speak with you and explain what their needs are. And then we'll have the direction from council at that time for after draft 1. And generally, we need probably 2, at least, draft budgets. Sometimes we go to 3. So I'm going to just finish this slide, and then I'll stop for a moment, see if there's any questions. So some of the dates that are, the key dates that are in the schedule that's already been established. We've already talked about the 15th and the 19th. So then draft 2 would come forward on February the 9th. We'll walk through the changes between draft 1 and draft 2. So you won't get full presentation from department heads at that meeting. It's just a walkthrough. Here's what we did based on the direction we received. At that time, you'll give us direction if there are any further changes that you want made. And if there are, we'll bring back on March the 2nd the draft 3. And at that time, we'll bring forward the forecast for information. And it's at that meeting that we pretty much assume that we're done. And we request also to move forward with the public meeting. And the public meeting is on March 28th, and it's an evening meeting. And that's when we have the department heads again present the final budget, and the public has the opportunity to engage at that meeting. And we also recommend that we move forward with the bylaw at the following council meeting to approve the budget. So that gives you a bit of an overview of our year-end process, our forecast process, and our budget process. So if there's any questions?
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, on slide 2, I'm wondering if you could provide a little definition to include monies raised for sinking funds and for retirement funds.
Through Your Worship. So sinking funds are where you're putting money away for an obligation that you have in the future. And we don't use the sinking fund approach. We don't have that requirement at this time, but yes, it is there provided for. And sorry, the second question was related to retirement?
referred to retirement fund. I wasn't sure if that meant the retirement fund for all of our town team or retirement fund to retire.
Thank you, through your worship. That would be to retire debt. Thank you.
Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure who this question is going to, but at what point will this council sit together with department heads to look at our priorities for this term of council?
Mr. CAO.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Timms, yes, we've got a schedule coming up. We've got to get back to council on that, but you'll see a schedule probably within the next week to 10 days.
Thank you, because it really has to be sort of aligned with the budget scheduling, does it not?
Absolutely, two have to sync up, yes.
Thank you.
And I do believe in our future sessions, that's already set up to have that discussion as well, Councillor. Any other questions from council before we move on? Seeing none, Madam Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. And that's one of the reasons why this budget process extends out to March and why we have multiple drafts, is because we do need to receive feedback from council on how to direct that budget. So I'm now going to move on. I just need to stop sharing for a moment and see how this works. Okay, I thought I could bring up two screens, and I'm not sure that I can, so I'm probably going to have to move between the presentation and another document. So I'm going to start here first, though, on this slide. So I'm going to talk about the financial statements. And they are audited annually. It's required under the Municipal Act that they be audited. And when I bring up the statements, you'll see on the very first page that they're called Consolidated Financial Report. And this is required because the library is a separate legal entity, and it's considered a local board. And the town has the decision to decide how the finances of that library are going to be reported and looked after. And the town, when they incorporated the library through a bylaw and through the act, they made the decision that the finances of the library would be incorporated in with the towns, and it's called a consolidated financial report. So that's the first thing on the title that you'll see that I wanted you to understand why it's consolidated. The other item I wanted to talk about was Public Sector Accounting Board, or PSAB standards. And these are the financial standards that financial statements for governments have to be prepared under. And under Section 294 of the Municipal Act, it states that we will use PSAB standards to prepare our financial statements. And within PSAB, and you'll hear me refer to PSAB in some of my staff reports, so it's important that you know I'm referring to a financial standard. And our financial statements, you might notice, look different from maybe what you're traditionally used to seeing. And again, this is part of a PSAB standard. We have to report our financial statements in this particular manner. So what I want to do now is I want to bring up the financial statements, and I'm just going to talk about a few items that I think we should go through. And reserves are going to be one of those, and I'll talk about the reserves when I bring up the statements. Just take me a moment to stop the share. Now, I'm still sharing this, am I, Dina? Which is, go back to here? Okay, here. Oh, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the help. Okay. So we are still seeing the document behind, so I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger so that we can focus on this one. So here's where you see consolidated financial report. And that's what I was speaking of earlier. And I'm now going to bring up the statement of financial position. And I've just highlighted a few things that I wanted to point out to you. There are really two main statements. There are a couple of other statements that go in the package as well, but the two main ones is the statement of financial position. And notice at the top it says, as at December 31st. This means that this statement is reporting to you on December 31st, 2021. It's on that date, this is the snapshot financial picture of the town. And you'll see on this statement, we talk about our financial assets, our liabilities, and then we have our net financial assets, which is this 116 of assets less the liabilities, 51 million in net financial assets. Then we talk about net non-financial assets, and we take the 276,000 of non-financial assets, add it to the net financial assets, and we get our accumulated surplus. So that's, you might look at this and think that's the balance sheet, and that's what you would consider, but government reporting is different. We don't call it a balance sheet. We call it a statement of financial position, and it does have some different elements to it that over time I'll go through, but it's too much detail to go through today. So that's just a general statement that I wanted to share with you today. The next main statement is statement of operations. And if you notice here on the statement of operations, it says for the year ended December 31st. This statement is talking about a 12-month period. The other one was talking about a certain date. This one says for this period of 12 months, operationally, here's what the town did. We had revenues that we brought in, and we had expenses, and our revenues are greater than our expenses. So in PSAB, we call that net revenues, which is this 5.8 million. And we also bring in revenues, and they get classified at the lower part of the statement where they're related to grants and transfers related to capital. And we bring in, add that to the 5.8 million, and we get the surplus, the annual surplus. Now, again, accounting is a bit different in PSAB. Our tangible capital assets and things are handled differently. So you'll hear me talk in the year-end memo. I'll bring forward a different surplus because this one has the accounting entries in it. It's more confusing. We didn't have in your mind a $31 million surplus. So I'll talk more about that when I do the year-end memo, and I'll explain that to you. But for now, understand this is the PSAB reporting requirement. So those are the two main statements. And this one, in your mind, you might think this is the income statement, and yeah, it's very similar. But again, under PSAB and government reporting, it is reported differently, and it has a different intent. So the next thing I want to talk about are general reserves. And before I go there, I'll just mention, if you notice here, our audited financial statements are 29 pages. And I said there are two main statements and then maybe a few other statements that follow afterwards. What's the rest of the 29 pages? It's notes and schedules that support the numbers on these statements at the beginning. And one of the notes talks about general reserves. So this is note 16. And in here, we have our general reserves. And the different, I'm going to talk about deferred revenue in a moment, which has obligatory reserves in it. But for the moment, I'm still going to start here with the general reserves. And these are reserves that are set aside for specific purposes, and it's done by council. And you see right here on the statement, reserves set aside for specific purposes by council. And we had 48 million at the end of 2021 in reserves, general reserves. Now, we have them grouped here into some major categories. So we have acquisition of tangible capital assets, almost 14 million. That's the money that we've set aside to do asset management. You have to replace assets as they come to the end of their life cycle. You have maintenance and repairs sometimes you have to do on the assets. Maintenance and repairs are generally operating expenses, but you may need to draw, if it's large enough, you may need to draw from your reserves to cover them. And you also have a tax rate stabilization reserve, and this is where we put away some of the surplus monies to be able to help smooth that tax rate impact in years where we suddenly have a very large expenditure budget. And so we might pull from this reserve to help with that. You'll see 25 million in water and wastewater reserves. And while these are general reserves, and most of them in this category are unrestricted, which means council can use them how they see and determine they need to be spent. The water and wastewater reserves, while a general reserve, you cannot spend it on anything but water and wastewater. It's a requirement under the Safe Water Drinking Act that we put away money. We have a financial plan that allows us to put away reserves for future needs, because when you built your water and sewer systems in the beginning, you had development charges to help pay for them. But when you have to replace them at the end of the life cycle, there's no development charges. You've got to pay for that. And you've got to put money away so that you have the ability. So we had the Schoonertown Bridge failure this year in some of our water mains. We had to replace them. So we turned to these reserves, and we have the ability to replace and maintain our water systems. We also have in here a government business enterprise reserve of 3.6 million. And what this is back in 2003, the hydro industry was changing, and our hydro utility, we loaned them 3.6 million out of our reserves. We've loaned it to them, and they pay us interest on that annually for that loan. So this is reserve money, but there's not ability to spend it because we've already loaned it out to the utility. So that's why it's isolated there on its own. We also have working fund general reserves, and these funds would be, for example, we have a project, we budgeted, we thought it would finish this year, it doesn't get completed. Now we have to carry those funds over into next year. So we flow them through the working funds and bring those numbers into the budget in the following year and finish that project off. And we also have some operating reserves, and you can see there that these are really general reserves that we just grouped into one line called operating reserves. And again, different departments have some reserves that they want to turn to for different needs that happen. For example, the winter maintenance is much more significant in a heavy snowfall year. They may need to draw on the winter maintenance reserve. So that gives you an example and some understanding of what's in the general reserves and how they get spent and used. So what I'd like to talk about now, unless there's some questions here, I'll move to deferred revenue. Am I good? So again, under PSAB, we are required for obligatory reserves to be reported as deferred revenue. So what are obligatory reserves? These are monies that have been advanced to us by through legislation or statute. So, for example, federal gas tax, provincial gas tax, development charges through the Development Charges Act. So all of those monies that were being advanced to us that we have not yet spent, they have to be reported as deferred revenue. And that sits on as a liability for the town. We haven't spent the money yet. It's been given to us in advance. We have to hold it there, and it's a liability until we spend it. But this word, obligatory reserve, makes everyone think these are reserves, and you are spending your reserves if you spend these monies, and that's just not correct. You are spending these deferred revenues because they've been given to you for very specific purposes, and now you're doing that. You're doing what you were supposed to do of why you were given the money. So that's really important for everyone to understand. General reserves are more what you're used to thinking of a reserve as, And the deferred revenues, that's money advanced to you for a specific purpose. And under other, they're still deferred revenues, but they're not coming in as from a statute or legislation, but they're restricted. So all of these are restricted because you can only spend them in a certain way. So under government grants, we received COVID grant money. It was restricted. There's only certain eligible expenditures that you can use that money for. And it was required to be reported as deferred revenue. And as well, we've received donations for the Arena Library Project, and they're restricted. The donor, when they gave them those monies, they can only be used for the TPAL project. We can't go and spend them on operations for something else. So they're restricted. So those are the types of monies that sit in the deferred revenues. And this is a note 11 that supports the statement. So you see here our total is 27.7 million of deferred revenues. And I'm just going to jump up to the top to statement of financial position, deferred revenue, 27.7 million. So you see how the note supports the statement. So the next item that I was going to talk about was debentures.
Yes, Councillor Leo?
Thank you, Worship. These deferred revenues, I'm a little confused on that. Do we get to use them, or they just have to sit in that account? Thank you.
Through your worship, yes, we get to use them, and that's what they're given to us for. So for example, development charges. We collect them based on when building permits are pulled, the developer pays us development charges, and they are in deferred revenue. When we have an eligible capital project that we can use those revenues for, then we pull from this, and we pull that in as income in that year to cover the costs of the works that we're doing in that year.
So each year you can carry it forward.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? All right.
Okay, let's talk about debentures. So these are our long-term liabilities, and this is note 13 of the statements. And you can see here that we have 4 different debentures. And Ontario Infrastructure Land Corporation is what OILC stands for. It's a corporation that provides low-interest financing to municipalities. And their operating name is Infrastructure Ontario. So it's much easier. You might hear COILC, but you might hear me say Infrastructure Ontario. It's the same organization. And you get some good information on this note. You can see that we had a fire pumper truck. The interest rate was 2.6%. We have semi-annual blended payments of $54,000 twice a year, and that's the principal and interest, and that this matures in March of 2025. And on December 31st, 2021, we still owed $368,000 on this debt. So that's useful information there. You can see there are, the next one is a loan through the Toronto Dominion Bank. So on this one, when we bought the beachfront properties, you can see there's also a portion of the debt for the beachfront properties under OILC as well. Well, we split that debt. When you borrow from Infrastructure Ontario, you might take a long-term loan of 10 or 20 years, 30 years. You can't pay that off early without a penalty that is so extreme, you might as well not pay it off early. So you're locked for a very long period of time. When you take a loan from the commercial bank, you can set the loan and amortize it over 25 years, but now it has a 10-year term. And in 10 years, when it matures, you could pay it off or pay some of it off and only reissue some of the debt. So you have more flexibility in your debt structure if you use the commercial loan, and the commercial loan will have a higher interest rate generally than the Ontario infrastructure. So you're using some financial strategies there to manage your debt, and that's why you're seeing different types of debt on the list here. And on the last one, you can see we did some streetlights that we had to retrofit, and we took out a 5-year debenture to cover those streetlights that were being installed. So that's about debentures there that I wanted to show you on the statements. And with that,
Any questions? Councillor DeLeo?
We can take out the debenture if we need a new plow trucks, right? Like plowers? Let's say next year we need a new plowers. We can use this form of a loan?
yes, you can debenture. So for example, you see the fire pumper truck? That's where we used a debenture for the fire pumper truck. Okay, so it's capital related.
Councillor Belanger?
Just for the new councilors, there is rules around the level of debt we can carry. So when we're looking at forecasts, when you indicate you could possibly buy a truck, but at some point in time, we could be getting close to what is legislated for total debt. And so you balance all that based on projects that are already in the works. And so it's not as simple as just saying you can always take out another debenture. There is some rules around that, I believe.
And yes, and you're going to see that shortly in the presentation.
All right,
So-
any other questions or comments? Carry on, Madam Treasurer.
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to close the financial statements because that's all I wanted to go through with those. And let's just see. Okay. So I've now got to share. Okay, I want to go here. No, I wanted this one. Okay, I'm just going to advance a couple of slides because I've already spoken to them on the financial statements. Okay, so I'll continue here with debt. In 2022, at the end of October, we have a total debt of $16.7 million. And at the end of 2021, our debt was $12.3 million. So during the year, we took a temporary construction financing loan for Main Street Bridge, and we transferred it into a debenture. So that was $2.7 million there that was added to the debt. We also took out another $2.5 million of construction financing for the TPEL project. And when the TPEL project is completely done, part of the financial plan is that we will be using anywhere from $30 to $31 million worth of debenture debt to pay for the building. But in the interim, we can use construction financing while the building is being built, because there's still a lot of trades and bills that have to be paid while the building is being built. And then at the end of, so the first time I drew on that construction financing loan was March of 2022. We have 5 years from that date before we have to transfer the construction financing into a long-term debt. That gives us a little bit of flexibility to watch the interest rate and decide when is the right time to convert that over to permanent debt. We are paying interest on it, but it's a lower interest rate than what you would typically pay. Unfortunately, though, interest rates have gone up, and even that interest rate is a lot higher. And that may end up changing our strategy going forward as to when we debenture that large amount. So then, at the end of 2023, while we have $16 million today, at the end of October, we project that we'll have $44 million at the end of 23, because now the building will be built, and we will have drawn on that construction financing, and we'll have more debt. The estimated carrying cost of that $44 million is approximately $3.3 million a year. So that means we're paying principal and interest payments annually, $3.3 million. So I'm going to just move to the next slide. And here's where I'm going to talk about the annual repayment limit. And this is a requirement that the province has for all municipalities. So they provide us with a maximum amount of debt carrying costs that we can carry. Notice this is not the maximum amount of debt, it's the maximum amount of debt carrying cost, principal and interest payments. So for 2022, we were allowed to carry costs of $8.5 million. That's what we can afford to pay. But what we're paying right now today is $1.9 million. So we're only using 22.6% of the debt capacity that we are allowed to do as a town or municipality on our own. If we needed more than the 8.5 million, we'd have to go to the province and ask permission to go into more debt. So right now, our debt is very low relative to what this municipality is capable of handling based on the formula the province puts out for all 444 municipalities. At the end of, and the ARL lags because it looks back. Notice that it's based on 2020 results. So when they're setting that, they're looking back a few years to set that. In 2023, that new ARL limit is going to come in closer to 9.6 million. So you can see it's growing because it's based on our revenues that we generate ourselves, our taxation, our user fees, revenues that we are generating ourselves. 25% of those revenues are what's determining how much can the debt be carried. So the ARL will tend to increase year after year. And right now we're using a very low. And even when we're using the 3.3 million, which is close to the maximum we expect to carry over the next little while, we still won't be anywhere near the 9.6 million that we'll be allowed to carry. So that gives you a sense of the debt structure for the town. The financial information return, I wanted to explain. This is another requirement under the Municipal Act. The town has to report to the province annually under a financial information return. And this is a format that the province decides this is the way they want to see our financial information because they want to do all sorts of comparisons with the other municipalities. So they have a set structure. And in the audited financial statements and the financial information return, they're identical in information as far as results, but they're two different formats. And so if you hear us refer to the FIR, that's the provincial format that you report your finances under. And if you hear us talk about the audited financial statements, that's the PSAB accounting standards way that you report financial information out to the public. Hope that doesn't confuse you, but I thought you should have an understanding there are two different formats that we follow.
I'm just going to stop you for a second here, Madam Treasurer, and ask if there are any further questions. Councillor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. When you indicate that, you know, we're at 22.6%, and then at the end of the year that will increase, but we also have projected projects that may require debentures in the future that we would anticipate. Like I know that, you know, there's only so many major projects, and if the redevelopment of the beachfront and the downtown were to require a debenture, then, you know, projectedly, we still have to be careful, and those carrying costs put a lot of pressure on our annual operation costs too, because it all has to be paid for in a single year. So I think it's just important to council to know that what you're seeing here is not everything that may be projected or forecasted by Treasury. Is that a fair statement?
So your comments are good comments to discuss. So first of all, one important comment is you don't want to be spending your $9.6 million envelope, because what happens if you have a major asset failure and you need debt? You have to have an emergency room in your envelope. So I am estimating the 3.3 million is going to be around 34% of our ARL. I wouldn't recommend us being, if we start getting up near 50%, I'd be concerned. You want that space in your capacity. So at 22%, at 34%, I think that's reasonable capacity that the town can handle. In the 10-year forecast, when we look at that, not only do we look at what are we going to spend in 10 years, I have to then project how are you going to pay for it. And I look at development charges, I look at reserves, I look at taxation and debt. Mainly, we don't use debt too much in the 10-year forecast. We might, on the water sewer side, incur another debenture from the water sewer perspective. We might do a mix of reserves and debentures, because again, sometimes you're financing a very long-term lasting asset, and it makes sense to spread that debt over the life of that asset and have the benefiting users or the town taxpayers pay over time. Those taxes pay for that debt. So there's some different reasons why we might do use debt, but most of the 10-year forecast, there isn't much additional debt added there, but there could be. And the beachfront development is one that we're going to have some conversations around, because to date, we have not considered any debt for the beachfront development, for the main reason that that development was not seen to be put onto the taxpayers. But we'll have those conversations because things are changing.
Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Justin, I don't know if we're going to get to it, but on one of your previous slides, you had like a $326 million surplus, and that is, my understanding, primarily the capital assets we own. You know, some of those would be facilities. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to expand on the new council, or we'll be getting there as to what makes up those capital assets that are accounted for in our financial statements.
I would suggest that's a conversation for another day. It's more detailed, and I'll make note to bring forward information to you, but at this time, I don't think we could get into that level of detail.
I would agree, and I think what's important for today is that the general public doesn't go away thinking we've got $321 million sitting around, as we do not. So let's just make that clear. I think that's where you're going with that, Councillor. Right, thank you. Madam Treasurer, sorry, any other questions from Council? Just with respect to taking out the construction loan versus the amounts we have sitting in reserves that we could borrow from, I just want to be clear for the public's information. I'm assuming we borrowed that funding outside of our reserves because our reserves are gaining more interest or paying us more interest than we would have to pay by borrowing outside. Is that correct?
Not exactly. We did use some of our reserves to help with the project, to pay for the project, but we could not cover all of the project through our general reserves. We need to keep those general reserves for other purposes as well. So we needed debt in order to finance the project. So it wasn't an interest rate choice, it was a financing choice that we needed the debt to be able to move forward and cover the payments for the building.
So then a supplemental to that is if, I mean, when we look at our debt ceiling, if you will, that we're allowed, we look at the amount of debt that we do have and the interest rates where they are today and where they may be going. I understand that we want to keep those reserves there should we need them, but we have the ability to borrow. So can you explain to me why we're not using our own funds then to finance this? If something was to happen, we had the ability to borrow last month, so we'll also obviously have the ability to borrow next month. The town is in very good financial shape. We have a great credit rating. I'm just trying to understand why we're paying interest on loans when we could be just borrowing that from our reserves.
So we do borrow from our reserves for some items. So for example, when we were replacing our fire truck, we've taken that and borrowed from reserves, and we're replenishing that reserve over the next 5 years. So we do some internal borrowing. However, what you're seeing right now is before the real impact has happened. So we haven't drawn fully on those reserves yet for the library arena project. So you're seeing the high number right now. As well, that 48 million in general reserves, 25 million of that is water and sewer that you can't use. That starts to bring that number down. 3 million of it was already loaned to the utilities, so you can't use that number. Then you have 14 million for your capital replacement. Well, if you borrow and take it out of your capital replacement, what are you going to have when your capital replacement needs come up? So you can't use all of your reserves. You can use them a little bit, but you can't borrow that level of need. You can't afford to take from your reserves. So we use a mixture of strategies. We do some of the internal borrowing, like you have said. I have also not used the construction financing to the extent that was originally planned for, simply because the interest rate went up. I kept a lot of cash on hand to make those large payments so that we would not be using construction financing, which is similar. So we do use different cash flow strategies, financing strategies. We do internal borrowing where we can, but this project was too big to borrow that much from the reserves.
All right, thank you very much. Carry on, please.
Thank you. So the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is strong financial position. Often we say the town is in a strong financial position, and why do we say that? Well, the province puts out financial indicators. And again, remember we talked about the FIR, the Financial Information Return, and one of the things they do is they compare all the municipalities and they develop some of these indicators. And you can see here, this financial indicator review was based on 2020 Financial Information Return. And you can see at the top there are sustainability indicators, there are flexibility indicators. So these are different tools that finance people can use to help evaluate the financial strength of the municipality. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to talk a little bit. These are slides that was in the auditor's presentation last year. And they used some of the financial indicators to talk about the strength of the town's financial position. And one of these indicators was debt servicing costs, which were 1.2 million. And they looked at that as a percentage of our own taxation, 44.7 million. And you can see on the screen that our result was that our debt servicing costs are 3.2% of our own source revenues. If you are at 5%, you're considered low risk. The average that the province is at is 5.5%, and the town is at 3.2%. We're doing well, and that's what this financial indicator is helping you to see. Another indicator that was used is looking at the reserves as a percent of your operating expenses. And in this particular situation, when they considered all of the reserves, we were 116% right off the chart. Low risk is if you're down at 20. But then some of these reserves are related to capital, like the water sewer reserves and the capital replacement reserves. And then if you only looked at what are the operational reserves, which are closer to 5.8 million? Well, we'd be down around 14% then, but we're still low risk. So again, when we look at some of these indicators, they help us to express comments about the financial state of the municipality. And the last one I'll show you is the net assets compared to our own revenues. And here again, you can see low risk would be minus 50%. The province average is at 36%, and we're way up at 132%. So these indicators help us to be able to express favorable opinions on our financial statement. And as we go through the year-end audit, you'll see more of these kind of indicators be talked about, and you'll get a better understanding. I just wanted to introduce them to you today, that they exist. So at this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about tax rate impacts. So are we in a good place to move to that topic?
Well, I'll just ask quickly if there's any other questions or comments. I know I do have one. All right, Madam Treasurer, sorry, Councillor Belanger, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, the only thing I would say is that when taken from 2020, given your previous slides where our debt at the end of 2022 of 16 million and the projected debt at 44 million at the end of 2023, we're still going to be in a good financial position, but it's going to change significantly from the slides you just showed us.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I guess if you could go back one slide, Madam Treasurer. I think it's important to point out at 132%, I mean, we're beyond excellent condition here, clearly. But I think it's a safe comment to say that when you look at other municipalities who offer their people, their citizens, a lot more services and have a lot more facilities for use, that is the reason they have more debt. So obviously, the less you offer the people of Wasaga Beach to be able to do or use, the less debt you're going to have. So as we move forward and we create the Arena Library, we create a cultural center, we start to look at the rebuilding of a proper Main Street or the redevelopment to a world-class facility for our beachfront. This number will obviously change because of that. Is that a fair comment?
That is a fair comment. Absolutely, if you want to build and grow the town, then you need to find funding mechanisms to pay for that. And you do get better levels of service, and you do pay a little bit more to get those levels of service.
So I just want to make that point so that the good folks of Wasaga Beach watching understand that nothing's free. Yes. We don't have $321 million laying around to use on those services. And as we move forward and create better services, that we will see these numbers change. So thank you. Carry on.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to your comments, too, I've heard it say many times that we're also a very young town from the perspective of when we put a lot of water and sewer in the ground, that, I've heard 50% through our life expectancy. But many older municipalities are faced with replacing those assets. And when you get to that point, that's no longer covered by development charges. So we're in a favorable position because we have a lot of young infrastructure.
And through your worship, if I may add to that, you're correct, but it's extremely important that the council consider long-term planning, and it goes beyond your 4-year term, because we have to be able to be in a good position when we get to the end of those life cycles, and they come at different stages. We have to be prepared for that. So those are important concepts.
And very good points. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Carry on, please.
Thank you. Okay, so tax rates. We all, I think, are familiar that MPAC assesses all of the property in the province for all municipalities. And that is, they have their own methodologies and ways to value those properties. And taxpayers pay property taxes on whatever assessment value MPAC assigns to their property. So there are different government levels that are receiving tax revenues from the payment. And so we have municipal tax, we have the county's tax, and we have education tax. So when we're looking at this chart on the bottom here, you can see in 2021 there were tax rates for each of the 3 levels of government, and then a total tax rate. And then I've shown the 2022 rates, and then the third column shows what's the difference. And these are expressed as percentages. So you can see the municipal tax, the change in the tax rate in 2022 is it was increased 2.97%. The county tax went up 2%. And again, the education tax was frozen, and we spoke a little bit about that in the last meeting, how the education tax rate is frozen and the challenges that brings when a rate is frozen. But the total tax rate for the taxpayer is the blended tax rate, 2.25%. So if they took last year's tax bill and this year's tax bill, and they took the difference and calculated that percent, they're going to get 2.25%. But on the municipal level that we control, ours is at 2.97%. So I'm going to move forward on this topic, just if everyone's all right with that. So how did our tax rate compare? And in this chart, you can see at the top, residential is municipal, county and education. So you can see those three columns. You can see several municipalities are listed in the column on the left. These are our comparator municipalities who have urbanized development like ours. On the last three columns, you can see that there are three different assessment values, 333,000, 350,000, 450,000. It's just giving you some examples there to see what would the tax rate be. And the tax rates are listed in order of highest tax rate to lowest. And you can see Wasaga Beach falls closer to the low end, and how we compare with our municipalities of what the annual taxes would be. So on a 333,000 assessed property, the taxes for the year for municipal portion, or the municipal portion would be 3,416. Sorry, I beg your pardon, that's all three taxes. My mistake. Down at the bottom of the chart, you can see that only the municipal portion is being shown. So of that 3,416 total tax amount, $1,977 of it comes to the municipality. And on a monthly basis, that's $165. And the change from 2021 to 2022 is an additional $4.75 a month, or $57 a year is what happened in the 22. That just sort of gives you a sense of how we compared to the other municipalities. I have to make sure I don't lose my voice here.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's important for us to point out publicly that I think most of us are aware that there's not too many homes in Wasaga Beach today that are assessed at, or not assessed, but are valued at $333,000 to $450,000. You know, our homes have evaluated well beyond that, and the direction that MPAC will move over time is to assess our homes more closely to their true value. We don't know specifically how that would occur, but I think it's important that the public realizes that there is that trend that is going to happen going forward.
Madam Treasurer?
Through your worship, yes, the MPAC process right now is to go out and look at the market every 4 years. And the last time they looked at the market was in January 2020. So the present assessment that we're working with today is the 2016 current value assessment. They did not roll out the 2020, even though they have it. That's when they froze the phase in, and they didn't roll it out. When they pick up again, they will likely pick up with the 2020. So it's still going to lag behind. Generally, the assessment will always lag behind the market. It's rare, well, we haven't yet gotten to the market position. So while the home might be worth $725,000 and it's assessed at $333,000, it's not going to jump to $725,000 next year. And furthermore, when they are looking at the 2020 current value assessment, if it's increased at that time, they're going to divide that amount by 4 and phase it in over 4 years. So again, it's not all going to come on to the taxpayer in 1 year. So I think it's also important to understand the timing of when MPAC assessments change and what that means to the taxpayer, as opposed to market conditions might change in that 4-year window up and down. They, you know, we saw them go up 30%, we've seen them come down. By the time the next 4-year cycle rolls around, the assessment values could be much closer than they were at one particular point in time in the 4-year window. So I think those are important things to understand as well. Okay, shall I move
Carry on.
on? Okay. This is the four-year operating forecast summary that was in the '22 budget. So you can see here that we broke it out between, this is just the taxation, it's not the total expenses, it's how much did we have to raise in taxation in that year. So to cover operations, we needed 25 million from taxes, and we needed 2.8 million from taxation to cover the capital budget. So in total, we had to raise $28 million from taxation. And that's where we got our 2.97% change from the previous year. In 2023, we have forecasted for operations, we need 27.5 million, and for capital, we need 3.1. So the total taxation amount we need to raise in the forecast is $30.6 million. And you can see here that the tax rate that we projected is 5.7%. And then it comes down again in the outlook years to 2.73, 2.54, and 2.5. So that was our forecast that was brought forward for information at last year's budget. And this forecast for 2023, that's where we start building our 2023 budget. We begin with what we knew here at this point in time. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to stop the sharing on this one and bring up another file. Okay, here? No. There? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of numbers. I promised you I'd give you some numbers, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to talk about the impact on tax rates. And I want to demonstrate a little bit about phase-in and some of the problems that are associated with looking at a tax rate change percentage, particularly when you're in a situation with no phase-in. So this first section here I'm going to talk about is what we needed in 2022. We needed to raise $28 million in taxation. The total assessment base, which is all the properties in town, add up all that assessment, that was the total assessment that we have for the town, 4.7 billion. We take 28 million, divide by 4.8 billion, and that's our tax rate. Now we apply that to the assessed value of the home. We're now saying for 2023 that we need $30.6 million in taxation. So if I look at the difference between what we need in 23 and what we needed in 22, we're looking for an additional revenue to the town of $2,193,000. That's additional monies that we would get if we raised $30.6 million through taxation. And as I go through this exercise, I want you to pay attention to that number, because at that number and this, you're going to see some changes. And that's what I'm hoping to demonstrate here. So in our 30.6 million 23 forecast, we've had some growth in the assessment. We've gone from this level of assessment now to 4.8. So when the close of the roll comes at the end of this year, which is for next year's budget, it's gone up. And that's because we've had growth in town. 1.8% of growth has occurred. We've had zero phase-in. Normally, we would have gotten more money in that base because of phase-in, but we didn't get it. So our tax rate is 5.71%. Now, if we got what we normally get in phase-in, which is about 2%. That's what it works out to each year. I'm going to put 2% in here, and I want you to watch what happens to our revenue number. It didn't change. The town did not get any additional revenue because of phase-in. What happened to the tax rate percentage? It went down. We got no additional money, but now the town, all of a sudden, it looks like it's bringing a tax rate in of 3.68%, not 5.7. And that's where this problem makes it hard for councils to make a decision if you're using the tax rate percentage change. You're actually then going to start trying to, if I take this 2% away, you're going to want to start trying to bring that number down. But that's not normally what we have. We're operating in a much more normal level because we normally have phase-in, which increases that assessment base and brings down the tax rate. So it's important when we're making decisions that we don't start to trim this number, try to trim this number down to bring this number here down to a place that's normally not where we would be. And that was what I was hoping to demonstrate with this chart is some of the elements of what happens when you focus too much on this tax rate percentage change and don't understand what is actually happening. You'll notice over here, and if I can just finish, and then you'll notice here I've shown you that in 2022, the taxes were in 1,978. And with, I'm going to set this to 0 for a minute. And without the phase-in, the taxes for 23 are $2,091. That means the change is $113 more in that average household of $333,000. And you can see here, $2,090, $333,000 average household. Now I'm going to put the phase-in in. Tax rate goes down to 3.68. We don't get any different money amount. Now the house value went up. $339,000 is the assessment. They're still paying $2,091, and they're still $114 more on their taxes. So understanding some of this, I realize you don't have to do this. This is not what I'm asking or expecting. I wanted you to just understand it really matters how we set those budget targets and understand the impact we're really having in terms of what's normal that the town should be looking at and what is the reality of the cost to the taxpayer.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer, and I think Council truly appreciates you going through this exercise because it's eye-opening for certain. Councillor White?
Thank you, through your worship. So the growth percentage of 1.88%, that's the increase in, let's say, number of units or places we're collecting tax from, not necessarily, and then the phase-in is the value of the assessment itself, correct?
That's correct.
How do you get the 1.88 number? Is that through building permit closures, like new occupancy permits? Like, how is that driven?
Yeah, so that's the new assessment that's coming online. So let's take the Sunnydale development. And all those new houses come online. That's all new assessment. That's new growth that's coming into our assessment number. Okay. And whatever amount of new growth we get expressed as a percentage, that's where the 188% is. It's expressing that new growth as a percent. And typically we range between 1.8 and 1.95. That's a normal range of growth that we see in the town with the level of development that we've been having over the past 5 years or so, and assuming that's continuing for the next 5 years, this level of growth generates about just under 2% assessment.
And if I may, Your Worship, and then that's combined commercial and residential, or is that ever broken out separately?
You can break it out separately, but we always express it at the total level. We never go into the difference between commercial and residential.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Treasurer, could you just speak quickly to, we see the increase in growth, but there's no phase-in, and just so people can understand why we have an increase in growth but no phase-in.
So the increase in growth, it's coming because the town is growing. We're getting more homes built in the town, more commercial industries are coming into town. We have the new Petro-Canada station, we have other commercial, we have the new casino. Those are bringing new assessment into our base. And so that's spreading those taxes that we have to pay are spread out over a bigger group of payers than it was before. When we look at phase-in, that is when we're saying the value of the homes have gone up, and the MPAC is assessing the value of those homes based on their methodologies. They're raising the value of the assessment up, and so now we get more phase-in, we get more assessment in because the value of the home went up. That's not in our control. That's based on MPAC and based on the market value of homes. So we have no control over that. When the province decided to set the phase-in frozen and not give it to municipalities, it really hurt municipalities because so many are focused on this percentage rate and trying to bring it back down. And so we're actually really hurting the municipality when we do that. Because again, remember, we have to plan for the long term, not just the short-term window. And if we're cutting our contributions to reserves and saying we just won't put money away into the reserves that we need for the future to bring that tax rate down, we're actually harming the town in the long run. And it's always harder to build that reserve back up later. You can be faced with very large bills and not have what you need. So it's not a good financial strategy. It's a reality that there's challenges out there for a balance between what the town needs and what the resident can afford, but we have a responsibility to look at that whole long-term picture and put together good financial planning when we're doing this.
So it's a next election versus next generation type of thing, councillors. Just keep that in mind. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. As this is a public meeting, and when we put out a forecast of 5.71, and that's before we started the budget process, is often when I'm talking to residents, they sort of have a different expectation of municipal government versus their household budget. You know, like if we're looking to raise taxes, then we must be overspending or doing those kind of things. So I think it's important to point out that we're not unlike a household budget, and some of the glaring examples to be considered is that we have a very large fleet, plow roads, all those kind of things, and fuel costs are up substantially. Like our residents know that because every time they go to the pumps, it's significantly more. But another is most of our facilities are heated with natural gas, and I think that's one that was quite shocking this year. Like personally, my average monthly bill last year averaging was $92. This year's it's $160. So I think it's important for the public to understand is just, and we've been a lean municipality, how we operate, but just to deliver the same level of service that we did previous year, our expenses, like theirs, have gone up substantially, and this council will do our very best for the taxpayer, but there are challenges that they face and that we face.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you, councillor. Any other questions or comments before we move along? Madam Treasurer?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to stop the share at this time on that one. Oh, I'm not very good at this, am I? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move now to the next slide. And this was just a recap slide. I just wanted to say phase-in doesn't produce revenue for the town, but it does reduce the tax rate percentage. And the tax rate percentage changes can be skewed by phase-in decisions that's not in the town's control. And it can lead to impairment of long-term sustainability goals for the town. So that's just my summary on that exercise. So at this point in time, I'd like to invite my staff. I have two staff here who are going to join us and talk a little bit about our rates and fees and our grants. And I just want to make sure. There. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring over this other chair. All right, okay, we got lots of chairs now. Okay. So first, I'd like to ask Shannon to introduce herself, and then I'll have Adam when we move to the next slide. So Shannon?
Through your worship, my name is Shannon Stewart. I am the Deputy Treasurer of the town. I've been here for approximately 3 years, and prior to that, I was the Deputy Treasurer and Tax Collector for the Township of Oro-Medonte. Here I manage 5 staff in our department in the areas of customer service, property tax, water and wastewater billing, as well as payroll. And I also assist with reporting needs, providing support to other departments related to customer service and revenue functions. So this morning I'm going to talk about rates and fees. We have our fees and charges bylaw. As the name suggests, it lays out the fees for services provided by the town. The schedules to this bylaw are laid out by department. We post these on the website so that users of our services can easily find the charges that apply to the services they're looking for. Every year in the fall, each department conducts a review of the fees for their department. They look at the reasonableness of the fees in place, whether they have added new services that need fees, or if there are fees still included for services that they no longer offer. All of these changes are then forwarded to me to consolidate and present at a public meeting, and this will be occurring on December 8th this year. The report that I will bring forward provides a summary of all of the fees that are going to be changed. It shows the name of the fee, what the current charges are, and what the new fee proposed is going to be. Every fall, I also complete a water and wastewater rate study. This is something that used to be done by consultants, and we just brought in-house last year. In the performing of this study, I review current users, consumption patterns, revenues and operational costs, and asset needs, including forecasting future financial needs for the water systems. And at the same public meeting, I present these findings of the study and the proposed water and wastewater fees for the next fiscal year. Once council has reviewed the new fees and charges, we will bring forward a bylaw requesting that they be approved, and they would be effective January 1st of the following year.
Thank you, Shannon. Madam Treasurer?
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. And I just wanted to have council have a chance to know that this was coming up at the December 8th meeting, and this is a standard process that we follow each year, so you'll get used to that, and that gives Shannon a chance to introduce herself, and she'll bring forward that presentation on the 8th. And so now, if I could, I'd like to turn it over to Adam and ask him to review his slide, and I'll just move the slide forward one. Oops.
Okay, good morning, members of council. My name is Adam Mighton. I'm the Senior Accounting Analyst for the town of Wasaga Beach. I've been with the town for just over 5 years. I look after asset management, coordination, procurement, consultation, special projects for Treasury, and I supervise accounts payable and accounts receivable. The Grants to Organizations program is a regular program that's been offered to local nonprofit organizations that are within the municipality or can demonstrate that they enhance the well-being of the Wasaga Beach community, or are individuals in the community that are involved in projects that improve the community. In 2022, the annual budget for this program was $39,500. In the fall, Treasury places advertisements on social media and local newspaper to advise residents and local organizations about the program and where to locate the application, which is at wasagabeach.com. Staff review the applications against the grants to organizations' policy requirements to ensure compliance, and in January, the applications are submitted to council members to review and evaluate the merits of the grant request and to assign the grant amount individually. The maximum amount is $5,000. Treasury staff then consolidate the individual council assignments in a table and come up with an average of these allocations and to present these to council for approval through a staff report in February. And just a reminder to those listening, the end of December is the deadline for those applications. So, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Questions or comments for Adam or Shannon? Councillor DeLeo?
So these grants, they're open to anyone, like any resident as well?
So typically they have to be a nonprofit organization in order to apply to it. So those are the types of groups we're seeking for these kind of grants.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. So there's a seniors team, baseball team, and they go out to the Klondike to play baseball each week, and their fees have gone up to $1,000 a year in order for somebody to go out there and put these diamonds on the ground. So for them, it was pretty heartbreaking. And a lot of them, you know, they were saying, we just can't afford that. Can they apply for this? Would that be considered a grant? Thank you.
Madam
Thank you. Perhaps if I could take this question, because there are eligibility requirements in our grant policy, and most of the requirements are for capital items. So for example, if an organization such as the Lions Club or one of those types of organizations needed a new dishwasher or stove, we might contribute towards that in a grant process. Whereas contributing to the actual operating costs of the nonprofit, that's generally not an eligible item. But certainly we allow all of the requests to be heard, and it is written in the policy that it's council's prerogative what they wish to support, but generally I would say we do not support operations.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Good, Councillor. All right, any other questions or comments? Is it common that we see year after year the same applicants, or have we been seeing different applicants on an annual basis?
Through the chair. So yes, we in the past few years we've seen several of the same people come through year after year putting their applications forward. Every year it is up to council what the grant amounts that they would like to allocate to these organizations. And there are times where there's more grant requests than there is funding available, and consideration needs to be made for that. But yeah, in the past we have seen a lot of the same organizations apply for these grants.
All right, thank you, Councillor Ego, and then Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, do these organizations show any financial statements or anything like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor. So yes, we do have a requirement as part of the policy that we review the financial statements of the organization for the previous year to make sure that that they are in need of the grant, and we provide copies of those financial statements to the councillors as well, so they can see that when they're making their consideration.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Councillor Ego. Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to add that historically, over the last few years, we have had very valid requests come in after the deadline. And I know that in some years it's been council's practice not to allocate the full $39,000 when we process the original grants, and that we hold back a little because we generally know that, you know, it could be a new startup organization or different things, but to ensure that that we try to help out as many organizations that contribute to our community as we can.
Sorry, Councillor Treasurer. Madam Treasurer.
Thank you. Perhaps I could also make another point that I think would be good to recognize. You may have organizations approach you wanting to make a deputation to council, and certainly we let them know that should they wish to make a deputation because it helps council understand their requirements better, that's okay, but they still have to go through the grant application process. And once that closes, which is generally around February, we may have spent our budget for the year and may have a small amount left for possibly one other grant request that comes through, or some of the school programs. We support some of the school programs. So at that point in time, it's harder for the deputations to go forward. But again, we do let them present, but now we're starting to step outside of our budget for that particular purpose. So they do occur, though, once in a while later in the year.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Any other questions or comments? All right, carry on.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Adam.
So this pretty much brings us to the end of the presentation. So I can generally only get you to take away 3 thoughts. So my 3 items that I'll highlight is understanding tax rate impacts help guide the setting of budget targets. I think if you have a good understanding, it's easier to appreciate those. Financial statements are prepared using PSAB standards, and you'll hear me call out PSAB in several staffing reports. And sustainable financial plans include building reserves for future maintenance and replacements of assets and infrastructure over the long term. And you're going to find with asset management legislation coming through, just like under the water sewer, the Safe Water Drinking Act says we must put a financial plan in place and put away monies for the future requirements. The asset management plan legislation is going to lead us in that same direction, because we have to put money away for future asset replacement. And those are my 3 highlights for today, and thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Last final comments or questions? Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just further to the Treasurer's last comments, is my understanding there is a gap currently between where we believe we should set aside for future capital reserves for all of that maintenance. I think we're in far better position than most municipalities, but that there is a significant gap, and so we need to try to make that up over time and build those reserves.
Sounds like the councillor. Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, and yes, we do have an asset management gap. It's about 3 million and growing as we add new assets to our portfolio. So we do try to address that, and in the budget process, you will hear me make reference to some of those asset management plans that we have in our contributions to reserves built into our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, Madam Treasurer, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And I do have a resolution that Council received a presentation from the Director of Finance and Treasurer pertaining to the town's finances and budget for information. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Belanger, second by Councillor Timms. All in favor? This is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, new business. We have a few items here. Community Services Sections accounts. It's resolved that the Community Services Section Department accounts for the month of October 1st to 31st, 2022, as reviewed by Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. Mover or seconder? There, 3.3 was removed. Yeah. Sorry, so back to 4.1. Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor DeLeo. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Number 4.2, Public Works Section accounts. Resolved that Public Works Section Department accounts for the months of October 1st to 31st, 2022, as received by Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. Questions or comments? Mover and a seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell, seconded by Councillor Ego. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. Item 4.3, Development Services Sections accounts. Resolved that The Development Services Section Department accounts for the month of October 1st to 31st, 2022, as received by Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. Questions or comments? Mover and a seconder. Councillor DeLeo, Councillor White, all in favor? Carried unanimously. And 4.4, General Government Services Section accounts, resolved that the General Government Service Section Department's accounts for the months of October 1st to 31st, 2022, as reviewed by Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. Questions or comments? Question, Councillor Eagle? No? All right. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Eagle, seconder by Councillor DeLeo. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, bylaws and confirmatory bylaws. 5.1, 2022-83, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Wasaga Beach at its special meeting held Tuesday, December 1st, 2022, be received and to be deemed to have read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered number 2022-83. Questions or comments? Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Belanger, Councillor White, all in favor? Carried unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, staff.